Hi everyone, this is Brad Bearden over here at Acctivate. Today we are joined by Donovan Sachs of Alembic Computer Services, and we are having a question and answer session over Acctivate Reporting and Crystal Reports. Donovan will be going over some questions, so if you have not already submitted your questions, then please feel free to submit them during this webinar, and hopefully Donovan will be able to cover them today. With that being said, I'll let Donovan take it from here.
Thank you, Brad. And thank Acctivate for asking me to do this today. We're going to take a stab at answering as many questions as we can, as best as we can. Acctivate and reporting is can be a very detailed topic and subject, but we're going to do our best to see if we can get some folks some answers today. Again, as Brad said, I'm Donovan Sachs. I'm with Alembic Computer Services. I've been here for 7 years. We do a lot of reporting work on both the Acctivate and QuickBooks side of the house, so we can do to help folks understand reporting a little bit better. Pretty much today, back in February, we did a webinar where we talked about the ins and outs of reporting inside Acctivate, and we really dove into how reports work in Acctivate, how you set them up, how you configure them, how you run them. So today we want to kind of talk more about Crystal reports. How do we get to the data? What can we do to customize some of these reports that are out there, and when do we need to make some reports from scratch? Because while there are lots of reports in product, they don't always answer everybody's specific needs. So we're going to kind of cover that a little bit. Again, we're not going to be able to go into a whole lot of detail just because Crystal report can get very detailed. So if anybody has questions, my contact information will be on the last slide at the end of the presentation, and I'll be happy to try to help you answer any questions or help you with any reports that you may need help with. So let's jump in and get started. Don't have many slides today as we're going to jump in and actually look at things. Here's a list of some of the questions that have already been submitted. We're going to try to run through these real quick, and then if we have some time as people submit questions, or if Brad sees a question that he thinks might be good to cover, I'll ask him to just jump in and share that, and we'll see what we can do to cover it. Again, we'll do our best here. Q&A on Crystal reporting can be a challenging one. So let's jump in here and see, when we're wanting to upgrade or update or change our product IDs, how is this going to change the reporting inside Acctivate? Pretty good question there, because once you make that change, you want to understand what the results are going to be when you go and run a sales order, when you print out your sales order, when you print a sales report, or anything along those lines. And the short answer is that original product ID at the time of the transaction is stored with the transaction, but the database also stores the GUID, or the background ID for that product. So we're able to link the transaction detail record back to the product information as it is today. So the standard is we're going to show you the original product ID that was sold, or that was worked with, purchased, whichever it might be. And then if you wanted to show the new product on transactions, on past transactions, reports can be modified to show that. Hopefully that makes sense, and when we jump in here a little bit, I'll point that out, and I'll show that here in just a little bit. So we'll kind of roll back to this question. See, how can I show orders that have been filled by a specific serial number? Currently, there's not a report that will do that for you. However, the data is there. Acctivate has what it calls an inventory transaction detail table, and pretty much anything that happens with inventory hits those tables, and we're able to go and we're able to look at that. I'm actually going to jump over into SQL Server Management Studio just to give people a quick view here of what that looks like. So those of you that, unless you have this tool, you're not going to see this view, but it's great for demonstration purposes. So here I'm in the Acctivate demo database. Here I have my list of tables, and I also have a list of predefined views that the folks over at Acctivate have built. So they've done a lot of the table linking for us, and we'll talk about those in just a minute as well. But what I wanted to show you is, if we look here at our invoice detail, for example, columns that we have, I do have the product ID and I also have a GUID product. Let me see if I can find those real fast. So here's my product ID and GUID product, sorry. So this GUID, this product ID right here is going to store, let's say we sold an ST10, and 6 months later we changed that to an ST10A, which is the example that I did, and I'll show you here in just a little bit. Inside this invoice 6 months ago, the product ID is going to be ST10, but my GUID is going to point me back to my product table. And so in my report, if I link my product table to my invoice detail table on this GUID product, which is a unique identifier, then I could pull the current product ID into the report. So hopefully that helps make a little more sense there. And again, the inventory transaction detail, this is the table that will have information about our products and serial numbers for all of our transactions, whether it's a receipt, an issue, a sale, all that's going to be there. So again, there's not a report in existence today, but it's something that could be created with a little bit of work inside Crystal. How can I get a list of customers and their last purchase date? I think the original question was a little more detailed on, I want to know what the purchases were. That report to get the details on the last purchase, that's going to take a little bit more legwork. But what I did want to demonstrate real quick today is to show you how we could get at least a quick list of customers and what their last purchase date was, and just kind of show you what that looks like inside Crystal. Everybody, please realize today that we on the call could have prospective Acctivate clients that are watching this to see what reporting looks like, current Acctivate customers, some with experience in Crystal reports and some not. So we're talking to a wide range of folks today. So please bear with me as I try to give a little bit of info to all those different stages so that hopefully everybody gets a little bit of something out of this session today. So here's a report that I had made, and we're going to use this to talk about linking and formulas and all that good stuff. I'm going to leave that up. But what I wanted to do is jump in and show you. When you are wanting to see what those last invoice date and customer are, we can jump in. We're going to connect to the demo database. We're going to go in. We're going to use the view. The nice thing about the views is when there's tables that need to be linked together to pull detail, for example, we want to pull the product class, and that's not stored with the invoice. Well, we want to link back to the product. The view already has that type of work done for us. So we're going to go and we're going to pull the invoice view, and that's all that we need. So we're going to pull the invoice view. We're going to go here into our design mode. We're going to jump in, and I'm going to just throw a couple fields on the report. We're not going to get too detailed. We're going to drag the customer ID here into our detail, and we are going to pull in the invoice date. We could do this off of the orders if you wanted to. If you were looking for the last order date, it would behave in a very similar fashion. So when I look at this, here's a list of customers, and here's a list of the invoice dates. And again, this is in the demo database. We can see Abercrombie in here a whole lot of times. So we're going to want to get those all grouped together, and then we're going to want to see what the oldest date is. So all we need to do is we need to do some grouping, and we're going to group by the customer ID. We say OK. That brings everybody together, but now I'm able to see it a lot better, but I don't want to have to go through and try to figure out, which one's the oldest. I could do some sorting and I could see that, but I'd much rather have a quicker answer. We're going to do a insert a summary, and because it's a date, we can't add them up, so the default is max. So we're going to get the max value, and we want to show that at our invoice customer level. So we're doing grouping, and in this case, instead of totaling, we're getting the max value out of all of the records here, and we're going to show that in the footer. So we can see that that 617 was our last order. Here, these guys haven't ordered for over a year. So again, lots of information. Let's dumb it down some. If we come into our section expert, so this allows us to control our groupings and our detail lines. we can come in and we can suppress or hide. There's reasons why you would want to suppress or hide, and that's getting more into some crystal detail. But we want to hide the detail lines, so now we have just that 6/17 date. But let's get these two on the same row. So we're going to take our header title, slide it down to our footer title, and then we're going to do some more hiding. We don't want to see a blank row between them. So here in our group header, we don't have any information, so we're going to hide that guy as well. And then we're going to do a preview again real quick. So now I have all my customers that have invoices. Again, this isn't everybody in my database. This is just those that have invoices and what their last invoice date was. Really don't care to see the time, so I can format this field, and I can make it just a date. Okay, got a little timestamp back there that I want to get rid of. So here's a list of customers and what their last invoice date was. So it can be as simple as that to make some of these reports that you would like to see, and it might make life a little bit easier for you in your day-to-day operations. Now, if we wanted to see the detail on this, okay, well, what were the items on that last invoice that they ordered? That's a whole another level deeper in reporting that we could take this whole session to talk about, so we're not going to go that deep. But I did want to show you that it's kind of can be that quick to get some of this information out that you're looking for or possibly looking for. So hopefully that helps folks understand what we've got going on and the capabilities there. And we're going to jump in and see if we can touch on another one here real quick. How do we add a date range to the stock on hand report? The standard stock on hand report inside Acctivate is not going to lend itself to doing that. The reason that I say that is because it's a summary report. It's taking into account, Acctivate in the back end is already calculating what your current quantity on hand is. It's got that in an inventory summary table or view, and it's just here's what your stock on hand is. If you wanted to have a stock on hand report that had a date range, and I think this one specifically was, well, I want my accountant or somebody, my inventory management person, to be able to see what was our stock on hand back on April 15th. Well, the stock on hand report really isn't going to lend itself to doing that because of the way that it's been constructed. What we would end up having to do is go back to that inventory detail transaction detail table that I talked about, where all of our ins and outs are recorded, and we'd have to build a report that looked back all the way to the beginning of the file and worked calculated those ins and outs. How many times did we buy it, issue it, sell it, to get all of our plus and minuses up to April 15th, and then we could see what it was on that date. And then we could do, well, let me change it to an as of date of May 15th. It's going to recalculate from the beginning of the file all of the ins and outs for the product and give you a current stock on hand that way. So it is possible, it's doable. We've done some similar work like that, so I can say that it can be done. It's just the current stock on hand report is not set up to take in that date range possibility. So probably not the answer that we were looking for there when we asked that question, but unfortunately I think that's the answer that we're going to get. So another one, we're looking for a report that shows quantity of items sold in a month, 6 months, a year, kind of in buckets. Some people may refer to this as a turns report, but a turns report is really turns report and a how many did I sell in a given period report are a little bit different. The turns report typically is how many times have I turned my inventory over. I want how many times did I buy it and sell it and buy it and sell it, not necessarily just how many have I sold. Because if I buy 2,000 of them and I turn those over in a month, that's one thing. That's one ratio that helps me understand how my business is doing. But if I've bought 2,000 and it takes me a year, well, is that a good thing, a bad thing? But all I want to know is I sold 100 each month. Now, that's kind of an inventory analysis or a sales analysis report. And that's possible, and that's doable as well. But what we would need to do there is we would, similar to what we did here where we hit our detail lines, what we end up having to do is pull our detail in for invoices or for sales orders. It depends on what you're looking for, how you want to base your information there. And then we have to do a formula essentially to analyze what was the date that this was sold, how many did I sell, and let me put it in a bucket. Let me put it in a current month bucket. Let me put it in a 3 to 6 month or a 30-day to 90-day bucket. And you have to do that by analyzing the current date and the transaction date in order to plop that in the appropriate column. And that's at least how we build those. We've built several of those. We've done some for Acctivate where we tell you how many you've sold over the last month, 3 months, 6 months, year, how many you've purchased, also similar to that. And then maybe you want to build one where you compare that to same buckets, but to the prior year, kind of a sales history. That's possible as well. Again, not something that exists, but is something that's buildable. But again, we could talk about that for probably a couple hours on how to actually get in there and build that report. So again, while Acctivate comes with a whole lot of reports, they're reports that are hopefully going to please the masses, and so many different industries can use Acctivate that trying to find reports that will work for everybody is a big challenge. So having chosen to use Crystal Reports as their reporting engine was a great decision, because we can get in here and we have the flexibility to pull all this data together. So I hope that, again, we didn't really get in and answer that specific, here's how you do it, but we have answered that it is possible. It's doable with a little bit of Crystal knowledge and a little bit of knowledge of the database. This is kind of more, I think, of an Acctivate report setup type question, but in Configuration Manager, I can't find the fields that I'm looking for. What can I do to add more fields? What I do want to do is jump into Acctivate and jump into the Configuration Manager real quick. We did talk about this a little bit in the February webinar. So if we go into Configuration Management, Reports, Reports Catalog, let's jump in and look at just any old report. Let's do products, and let's look at our selection prompts. So here's where we set up our reports to work with different fields, different data that we want to filter and sort by. And I'm hoping that this is where we were going with that question. Is there's fields here, I want to add some more. There's something missing, something I would like to filter by. So I want to jump in and add it. Here in the field selection, we have every field available to us that are in the views that were used to build this report. So here we have our product. They've linked to the product class so that we can get to things like product description in the report. And we have our product warehouse summary where we get our quantity on hand value, all those pieces of information that relate to inventory in the warehouse. So they've linked to that for us. So if the field that you're looking for isn't in this list of fields, what we would need to do is we would need to figure out, well, what is it that you want to add, and does it, how do we link that together? A lot of times it's linked on the GUID, that unique identifier, which is stored in both tables. We need to add that. Well, that's a report modification inside Crystal. So we want to go in and modify the report, add a view, link those tables, again, Crystal thing. But if our value is here and there is something that we want to filter by, we can simply select it. Let's say we want the alternate product ID. I want to be able to filter by which is already in here. We can see that here it's a text. You have to type that value in. Whereas if it would have been the product ID, we could select it, Acctivate. When I run the report, we'll pull up the product screen. We'd be able to select from a list of products. When it's text, that's because that predefined list has not been built, and we can't do anything to change that. We just have to know that from now, for filtering the report by the alternate product ID, we have to know the alternate product ID, and we have to know what it is so we can type it in, or we have to be at least close enough that we can do where the alternate product ID is like something, and that's one of those filters when we run the report that we can, one of those parameters that we can pick. Either is it between, is it like, is it in, and again, we kind of talked about that in February as well. So if you don't see it in this list, we need to modify the report, and we need to get that supporting table in there for you, or view in there for you, so that you can select it. If you're looking for a value over here on the right hand side, if you don't see like customer ID, customer type, if it's not there, you have to go with text and you have to type those values in. Hope that makes sense. No, we don't want to save our changes. All right, real quick, I do have a note here from Brian over at Acctivate that the inventory valuation report can be run by date, and it's mostly for an accountant scenario. So if you have more questions about that, touch base with us offline and we can go through that and look at it and see if that's going to meet your needs, and if not, why, and kind of expand on that a little bit more. Or if we have time at the end, we can jump in and take a look at that as well. Alrighty. How do I include custom fields on a Crystal report? That's just a matter of getting that report opened up inside Crystal and dragging that field onto the report wherever you're wanting to see it. So we're going to actually talk about all three of these last ones all at the same time. So how do joins work? We've talked about joining tables a little bit here, and I'm going to kind of show you how that works in Crystal. And then how do we suppress information in Crystal? So for those of you who have Crystal reports and you want to get in there and get your hands dirty, we're going to try to go over some of that here real quick. So here's a report that I kind of threw together to show some of these examples. So we're going to build this here on the fly as well. I just kind of wanted to have this open so that we could see what we're shooting for. We're going to pull in our product, we're going to pull in the custom field value, and then we're going to get the product class description, and then we're going to do a little if-then-else formula, and then we're going to suppress some information just because we don't want to see it in the report. We don't ever want to see it in this report, so let's just tell Crystal from the get-go that we don't want to see it. That way we don't have to filter it every time we run it inside Acctivate. So if we create a brand new report, we come in and we select our data source. I'll touch on this real quick because we're doing okay on time. I think Brad does have some more questions, but let's hit this real quick. When you're building a report inside Crystal from scratch, you need to define your data source. And to do that, typically we use our ODBC connections when we're doing reports, but for it to work properly inside Acctivate, so that it works with any company file that you're running, the OLE connection is the one to go with. And then if you make a new connection, you pick the provider for SQL Server, the Microsoft OLE provider for SQL Server. Click Next. You go through and identify your server, and you're going to want to tell it that it's going to run locally to where Acctivate is installed. So you could come through here and you could pick an actual server, pick the actual server name, and if you weren't trying to share these outside of your organization, doing this would work great. But it's more than likely that when I send a report off to a customer, they are not going to have a server named QBRC Sachs Acctivate. So what we end up doing here is we come in and we put the word local in front of Acctivate. Acctivate is the instance of SQL Server that gets installed when you install the software. So that's what this Acctivate is referring to. And local is referring to the local machine. So you're going to look at the local box, and since reports are stored on the server, it's going to look to that machine, look for the Acctivate database, and then or the SQL instance, and then at the bottom we're going to define the database, but that database is a dynamic value when we're doing this OLE connection. So I could run this for my demo company, I could run this for my practice or my model company, and I could run it for my live company, and if I have 5 live companies, well, it'll work for all of them. So we give it our SA username and then our password, which is Acctivate !MSSQL, and if you need that, please reach out to the folks at Acctivate or myself, and we'll be happy to help you out. So we're going to hit our demo database today, and we're going to finish. And what that does is creates this, which you probably already saw on here, but because we've already defined it, local, Acctivate, come down, and I'm going to pick my views. On this report, we're going to throw in our product, and we're going to throw in our product class. So we've selected our tables, and this is using the wizard inside Crystal, so it kind of takes us through each step to get us up to build a report. I often will get to a certain point and then bail on it and add my fields manually because I don't like the way Crystal decides to do it for me. So Crystal tries to get smart and link your data, link your tables for you. And when you have a lot of tables and it tries to get it right, it can get rather confusing. So oftentimes we'll come in here and we'll remove all the links and then we'll just link them the way that we know they need to be linked. But here we can see it's trying to link on product class ID from our product table to our product class ID on the product class table. That's great as long as we don't change the name of the product class. If we change that name of the product class, well then we've lost our link. So that's something that can be changed. So we're going to delete that link. We don't want to link on description, again, for the same reason. If I link on the description and I change the description in my product class, and actually that's the product description to the product class description, so those things don't match anyway. So that's a bad link. But here we have this GUID product class, GUID product class. This is a value that's assigned by SQL, by the database, and the only way you can change it is if you go into SQL and mess with your data, and that's just not something that everybody does. So this is your ideal way of linking these two tables. So that way, if I change my product class ID, it's still going to pull the description in, even if I've updated, after I've updated that. So I can't think of an exact scenario where you might do that. It's going to be more on the product ID to the order or to the invoice or the purchase order is where you're going to run across those. But again, link on the GUID and you're going to be safe. If there's not a GUID, well, then you have to kind of make an educated decision on what's the best field. But in most situations, you're going to have a GUID. This is usually where I stop. I say finish, and then it opens up a blank Crystal report. Next step would have been pick the fields you want to display and how you want to group them, and it gets through all that. But again, I don't like the way that it puts them on there, and I have to do a whole bunch of work afterwards anyway, so we're just going to jump in here. Now we have a list of fields. Which fields do we want to display on our report? We're going to, if we drag and drop our product ID, we're going to put that on the detail line. So now I have my product ID. It's going to show us there. So we've done our linking. Let's see, we're going to throw in a custom field, and we're going to throw in the product class ID. Custom fields in Acctivate, when you create a custom field and you pick what kind of custom field it is, whether it's a product custom field, an order custom field, business alert, whatever it is, it will turn around and create that field in the database in the respective table. So I created a product custom field called sales group, and it creates that field with an underscore in front of it, and that's what tells me that it's a custom field. Whenever you see a value in your table or your view that has an underscore, that is your custom field value. And if you have things sorted alphabetically, they're always going to appear at the top of your list. So we're going to drag that onto the report, and we're going to go and grab our product class ID. So if we did that and we looked at our report, well, here's my one that has my one record that has a sales group, and then here's my product class ID. Well, maybe I want this spelled out. Maybe I don't want this short identifier. I want to see furniture. Well, that's not in my product table. They give me my product class ID and my GUID product class. I need to go grab that description for the product class from the actual product class view. Because I've linked those on the GUID, the two tables or the two views are related. I can bring my description over, and now I can actually see that spelled out. And I could go and I could delete my product class off my report and see a full name, something that maybe makes a little more sense to the end user. And there we have it. So one other piece that some folks asked about is an if-then-else statement. Well, what if I want to show something, but only if something else is true? So I did that earlier, so you don't have to watch me type all that out. Over here, I want to see if my item has a sales group of school supplies, tell me yes. Because maybe I'm going to export this to Excel, and I'm going to use that Excel document to sort, filter, and do all kinds of stuff to create some different lists that I want to share with other users. Well, if I have a field that says yes, all I have to do then is maybe filter that Excel document by the value of yes over here in my school catalog column is maybe what I call it. So let's look at the statement real quick. Those that want to get into Crystal and get a little bit deeper, it's really just if your rule, then do this, otherwise do this. So here we say that if our custom field has a value of school supplies, then display the word yes. We have the single quote as indicating what the value of the field is, and then the double quote is telling us, hey, we're returning a string value, so we need to, that's just the syntax rule, is throw that in quotes. Here I could have told it to display any of the fields in the database, and inside Crystal I have the ability to double click and add those down here to the formula. I could have, let's say we didn't want it to say yes, but we just wanted to regurgitate the product sales group. I would have deleted yes, and I would have left I would have put my field in here, and then if this rule, if it's not sales group, then show no. Now, what you'll notice on our report when we save and close this and we look at our report, well, a lot of these don't have a value at all, and that's because the custom field has no value. So it can't compare, does the value of that field equal school supplies? Yes or no. But if there is no value, then it can't compare that, so then we have to start working null values, N-U-L-L, into our formulas and says, well, if the value is null, then display no, or if it's not equal to school supplies, display no, but then else say yes. So if all these other things, if all these other rules don't apply, say no, and then when the opposite of that happens, display yes. And so you can see there's multiple ways to work those formulas. The if then else is rather straightforward. You just have to know what field you're looking for, and then what do you want it to either equal. You can do less than, greater than. So if you're doing sales, if my sales amount is greater than 50, what do you want to do? If it's less than 0, what do you want to do? And it's that than, do this, and then if you want it to do something else, if that rule is not true, do your else. So that's a little bit deeper into Crystal than some folks may have expected or wanted to go and get, but those questions are out there for those that are trying to get their hands dirty inside Crystal reports and modify some of these reports on their own. So let's see, one last thing that I'd like to show you is, again, maybe I want to suppress some of this data. Maybe I don't want to see everything that has a product class ID of furniture. I just want this list. I'm building this report. It's a report I run every day, every week, and I just want to be able to run it and not have to mess with filtering it when I run it inside Acctivate. To do that, we come into our section expert, our report section expert inside Crystal, and on my detail row, because that's where we've got all of our data on the detail line at this point. We're not doing grouping. I want to suppress the information. It's a little bit different than hide it. We can't drill down on it if we suppress it. I just don't want to see it. When we come into this formula, this looks very similar to where we were when we were doing our if then else. In a suppression formula, you don't have to say if then else. You basically, when do you want to suppress it? Well, if my product class ID is equal to Fern, and throwing some extra letters there. So when my product class ID equals Fern, that's when I want to suppress it. I don't have to tell it if, then. It's just I'm doing a suppression formula, so it's what's the rule when I am wanting to suppress the record. So if I click OK, and I click OK, we can watch, we have no more furniture items. So those records are now being suppressed. Can't see them in my report. I'm not going to be able to double click on anything and drill down. The only thing you have to be careful there is if you're doing sums, that you're doing things appropriately, because sometimes a sum inside Crystal will still pick up a value. So if there's a dollar value there, just because you're hiding it doesn't mean that it's not there. So Crystal will still count it. So that's when we have to do things like running totals. Again, we could get in waist deep into Crystal and all the ins and outs and intricacies of Crystal, but hopefully this kind of gives you an idea of what's possible, what we can do, and for more detailed, in-depth information, just reach out to us at a later date when we can maybe spend a little more time on the exact specific questions that we're looking at. So Brad, I went kind of quick there, but I wanted to make sure we can get as many questions as possible touched on. So do we have any others that you've received either in email or in the chat today?
We did have another one that came in right before the webinar started, and it says how to print with page breaks between groups. Specifically, they were saying they have a report that lists out customer information, and they want each customer to print on a new page. I don't know if that's something you can easily show us.
Let's jump in. Let's go to this this report that we made here. It's kind of a simple report. It's not probably as detailed as what the user is looking for, but again, it's a Crystal thing. So if you have Crystal, you can take that report that in question, and we'll jump in real quick and show you where those reports are saved as well. I think that might be a good idea if people don't know where they can find them. So here in my design view, I always try to do things in design view versus preview. It kind of works a little bit better that way. We have our groups, and so basically you're saying that after my group, I want to put a page break. And so you go into your section expert, you can go report section expert, or you can right click on the section that you're wanting to go into and select section expert. And then we have a paging tab. Now this is for my version of Crystal. Different versions, these are a little bit different as they've gotten, the newer versions have tabs, older versions it's all kind of in one screen. But all I have to do is I can pick here new page before, new page after. So if I said new page after that group and say OK, and I go back and look at my report, I now have not just everybody on one page, but now I have one record per page. And again, if I had a lot of information and I wanted it customer specific and I wanted to email it out or print it to a PDF and have page breaks and all that fun stuff, there we go. Hopefully that got them what they were really looking for.
And we got another couple questions here. Some of these are pretty specific, and we may not have time to cover them, so these might need to be covered offline. But I'll go ahead and read off a couple just so you can touch on whether or not that's possible or not. So the first question is, how can variance reports be generated as far as what we received versus what is listed on the packing list? I don't know if you have any input on that.
So yeah, that would require a little bit of conversation, I think, because then we have to talk about, well, what's on the packing list. Is it is that our packing list that we said, hey, we shipped this, but when we're receiving it, that would be, okay, we ordered 10 on a PO, vendor packed those, sent them to us, we received 8. There would be some comparison there, I guess, on what was ordered versus what was received, so we could get into a report like that. I think it's doable, but that would definitely be some specifics. But again, what we'd be looking for is your PO detail, and there's a received amount. So we would want to go pull what was ordered versus what was received to get that difference and that variance to kind of see what is either open or maybe what we didn't receive in full.
Okay. Someone else said they'd like to run a month to date.
Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that made sense. Someone else said they'd like to run a month to date, quarter to date commissions report. How do I get the current report to display those kinds of dates side by side? I know that's probably too complex to show right now, but
so let's jump in and just open the report real quick and take a quick look. Do we have other questions, Brad, or is that kind of our?
There's another question here, and I may not be understanding it completely, but it says, how long is the implementation of Crystal to Acctivate? And I think, again, I may not understand this correctly, but Crystal reports can connect to the Acctivate database. That's immediate. We have a couple articles on how to set it up. So if you did have Crystal reports, you could immediately connect to the database and start modifying or creating reports.
Definitely. So hopefully I gave by showing you here how I created a report. We did that report from scratch. We identified the data source, and then we jumped in and started building. And I mean, I'm pulling data right off of the demo database. If that's inside Crystal, I could still run it in Crystal all day long. Or if I wanted to make it part of Acctivate, I just jump into the configuration manager. We add it to the configuration manager, and now it's live and you're up and running. So instantaneous as far as getting Crystal, getting Acctivate data pulled into Crystal. It's live, it refreshes. There's no need to sync data anywhere, anything like that. It's you hit refresh and you're seeing your data. Now we have some reports that take a little while to run because they're doing a whole lot of fancy footwork in the background, and it takes a while for that to process and to do all of the formulas maybe that we've got going on a big file. But other than that, that's the only time you really have to wait. So let's jump in real quick, and I think it might be a good idea to show folks where these reports are saved or stored. So I'm going to jump in. Keep in mind on Acctivate, everything lives here in your C program files as far as Acctivate, the database, and the canned reports. So if we go in to program files, x86, it could be program files depending on your operating system and all that fun and exciting stuff. But when I go inside Acctivate, I have a reports folder. Now keep in mind, this is where the standard canned Acctivate reports live. When you install Acctivate, these are the reports that come with the software, and this is where they get saved at. I recommend not touching these, not manipulating these, not changing these, just because it's, we want to keep the standard reports there just in case we ever need to revert back to them, refer back to them, fall back to them because there's a problem in our reports, anything along that lines. If you have a report here that is a good foundation and a start for something that you want to modify, I recommend making a copy of it and either putting it in a working folder, put it somewhere else on your system, on your network, make your changes in Crystal, and then there's a couple ways to get that report back into Acctivate. If you want to override the existing report, so let's say we're going to take this commissions report, and I'm going to copy that, and maybe I paste that onto my desktop. And no, I don't recommend that because, hey, we don't want to live in the desktop. But I put it on my desktop, I make changes to it, I add a field to it, and now I want to make that part of Acctivate. You have two things. Do you want to replace the existing commissions report, or do you want to import it as another, add it as a secondary report into Acctivate? If you want to add it as a secondary report, go into Configuration Manager, add a report, browse to the report on your desktop or wherever you saved it, and when you do that, Acctivate is going to take a copy of that report from wherever you have it saved, and it's going to put it into the custom reports folder for Acctivate. So it's going to make that copy and move it for you. And I'm going to show you where that custom reports folder is here next. If you are wanting to override the commission report and you want your version to be the one and only version, you can go into Configuration Manager, and you can, where it has the Browse button inside Configuration Manager, which is where I was just talking about, you can tell it, hey, I want to pull that report here from my desktop. What it's going to do is it's going to take a copy of that commission report, and it's going to put it in the custom reports folder again. But now you have the commission report in the standard folder, you have a commission report in the custom reports folder. If they're both the same name, the report in the custom reports folder always wins. So if I did that and I came in to commission report, if I had that saved on my desktop, I did an edit, I did a browse, and I browse to the one on my desktop, click OK, it's going to pop up and ask me if I'm sure. I say yes. Now I'm going to have a copy of that in my custom reports folder. It's going to display custom reports right up here in red. What I want to jump in and show you is where is it putting those custom reports. If we go back outside, back to the C drive of the server, and I'll show you one other way to get there. Under program data, which is a hidden folder, there's an Alterity folder, Acctivate, custom reports. Here's where your custom reports live. You can drop a report directly in here, so that commissions report, I can drop that in here, and now it's going to use this version of the commissions report. I didn't have to go into Configuration Manager and add it. I just manually added it to the custom reports folder. Now, if it has a different name and that report doesn't exist inside Acctivate, I need to go through Configuration Manager, set it up as a new report, and away we go. Again, it will copy it into this folder. One other way to get here, if you are doing this work from your desktop and you're not on the server, through the network section of Windows Explorer here, I can go find the server, and you should see two shares that Acctivate creates when it installs, and the server will share these folders. I have Acctivate, which is where my data, my database, my reports, all of that standard stuff is inside the Acctivate share. The Acctivate data share is where I can get to my custom reports. If we open this report, here's what that report looks like inside Crystal, and then we have to start doing some fancy footwork. Can you remind me, Brad, what did we want to add to the commission report?
It was periods, month to date and quarter to date.
So what we would have to do there is we would end up having to create some formulas. One, we'd have to make sure that the report was pulling in all of our data that we would need to do those formulas. But another thing that may end up having to be done to accommodate that type of report, a lot of times back in the day, we'll say, we would have maybe had to do a sub-report to pull in a separate set of data to figure out, okay, well, what was it for that for that period, and then let me pull that into my main report. What we've started doing here at Alembic is we do all of our reports, we start them as a SQL statement. So we go into SQL Server Management Studio and we write a query, and we write it out, and we say, here's the data that we want to pull, and that gives us ultimate really control of the data. We're not bound by the limitations of Crystal. While Crystal is a powerful tool, there are just some things that it can be a labor to get out of it because of how the grouping and the details work. We can't always get those pockets or those buckets of data necessarily the way we want them, or we have some weird relationships in the information, or just, believe me, we've got some odd requests. So we just do that as a SQL statement, and we build those buckets inside our SQL. So again, that would be kind of a much deeper dive. Definitely not something that we can cover in the next 3 minutes, but it is doable. It's possible. Again, we've done several custom commission reports, and everybody's is just a little bit different. So it really is a big one, but you could come into here and see what data is available. But if you're curious, this is a good place to start. Just open that commission report inside Crystal, look and see, we're pulling invoice and invoice detail. We can look here and see that we've got our price and our quantity from our invoice detail, our quantity shipped, and so that's on my it really is my detail, but it's been moved here up to the header to give us totals, summing, and we're showing the detail on some of those. So yeah, it is a pretty deep question, but definitely something we could help with offline if that individual wants to go a little deeper. With that being said, I guess we should display this last slide just because it has my contact information, but you can also reach out to Acctivate support. They can help steer you in the right direction as well.
Yeah, thank you, Donovan. If there are any other questions we did not get to today, you can submit a support request by going to our help site. Alternatively, you can contact Donovan at his information, which is on the screen. I'd like to thank Donovan and everyone for joining us today. Thank you.